Story 1. Did you hear that Jason Benson is coming to us for the 4th time? My friend Jeff asked. No, I haven't heard about it, I replied quietly. He must have already climbed quite high up the military ladder. I remember how many years ago he was just a captain, Jeff confirmed. That's impressive, I said, acknowledging his achievements. Jason Benson was considered the epitome of the all-American guy in the city. He was the best quarterback on the high school football team and a shortstop in baseball. He graduated at the top of his class and received offers from first division universities. He did well at West Point, graduated from high school as one of the best in his class, and played football and baseball. He was a talented athlete, soldier and citizen, which I had to admit, although he possessed qualities I did not have. Usually, his success didn't bother me, but there was one problem. Even at school, he dated Sarah, who has now become my wife. At school, everyone thought Sarah was perfect for Jason. She was an outstanding athlete, the second best student in her class, and was considered the most beautiful girl in Williamsport. Despite the fact that they broke up when Jason enrolled at West Point and Sarah at Temple, they never resumed their relationship. At school, I was 2 years older than them, not the best student, but still successful. I studied at a public school in the Faculty of Engineering and became increasingly interested in programming as computers appeared more often in my daily life. I had experience working for several companies before I finally had the courage to open my own. The decision to marry Sarah still haunts me, but somehow I convinced her. This remains the greatest achievement of my life, or at least the most significant step taken on my own. Our 2 daughters are a joint effort and a source of pride for us. Sarah rarely mentioned Jason, understanding my discomfort about this story from her past. Kind-hearted people would invariably bring up his name from time to time. I was constantly intimidated by their expectations that I should value Jason highly and support his idea of being with Sarah. It seemed that my own thoughts and emotions about Jason were not being taken into account. Many people thought that Sarah would have been better off if she had stayed with Jason. I want to praise Sarah's parents for never hinting at anything like this. Many years ago, at a family picnic, I witnessed Sarah's mother visibly upset when one of her cousins expressed the opinion that Sarah should have married Jason. It was a thoughtless and hurtful comment that only a fool could make in front of the shocked and silent crowd. She quickly put her cousin in his place, defending Sarah's husband and me, stressing what a wonderful husband and father I am. She made it clear that her cousin's statement was completely ignorant and unfounded. Sarah's mother's sudden lunge made Sarah smile, and she surreptitiously squeezed my hand under the table. Sarah has always treated me with love and respect, never making it clear that I'm not the perfect husband for her. So, why didn't I feel worthy enough? I was constantly compared to Jason Benson, a hero who was admired. It constantly seemed to me that I was not up to him, either in my own eyes or in the eyes of others. My conversation with Jeff ended when April, my daughter, grabbed a basketball from the opposing team's defender and rushed ahead of everyone. Both my daughters played basketball in the summer league, and April's speed and determination made her a formidable opponent. The other girls didn't seem to want to meet her on the playground, except for June, my eldest daughter. June was distinguished by her grace and natural ease of movement, which made her an outstanding player. She decided to get a volleyball scholarship to go to Temple in the fall, although she could have chosen basketball. April, a junior in high school, was a key player on the basketball team that was aiming to win the district and get to the state championship. I always enjoy watching my daughters play sports because they excelled in every sport and always gave their best. Their natural speed and athleticism, inherited from Sarah, allowed them to become the best athletes. June recently became the best in her class, and the coaches awarded her a scholarship. April was also a strong contender for first place. When the game ended, I came out of the stands to meet the girls as they shook hands with their rivals. June asked, "It's not a bad game, is it, Dad?" April dominated the court, not allowing the other team to go beyond the half court. In the end, the coach asked April to loosen up her defense, reminding her that they were playing to win and not just for fun. April explained that she did not want to suppress the morale of the other team by playing too aggressively. June followed her example, giving her rivals a chance to catch up with her. But in the end, she still became the top scorer of the game. Well, girls, Summer League promises to be a fun time for all the kids. When we discussed our goals at the very beginning, we decided to focus on developing sportsmanship and teamwork. I recalled Coach Simons making a big impression on me today. Dad, you always strive to make everyone happy, except when you compete with us. You never treat April and me lightly when we play at home, June remarked. That's because I know that both of you are tough, both mentally and physically. I want you to understand how important it is to never give up and give your best. When it comes to school league games, no one underestimates you, right? You have to understand the level of competition and adjust your game accordingly. Do you think I will succeed in business if I constantly let my clients win at golf? I asked. It's a difficult balance, Dad. It may be easier for you to lose to your clients, but June can definitely beat you on the golf course. I doubt you can handle them easily, April joked. You may not be the best golfer in the world, but you definitely have some skills, young lady, I encouraged April. I realized that it is important to show diligence and be merciful in defeat. This is the key to success in the golf business. It's good that you explain this to June, Dad, because she plays so well that she can start losing customers right and left if she doesn't follow your advice, April teased her sister. Maybe she should watch you play to get some tips. When we arrived back at the house, I did not try to come up with a suitable answer. I knew that I could always succeed by coaching and teaching children sports, even better than playing with them. Sarah, a natural athlete, passed on her skills to our daughters, unlike me, who had to strain to keep up. Sarah moved easily behind us. The girls willingly shared with her the details of their day and game. When we entered the house, I was delighted with their connection. How did three amazing women end up in my life? I thought. Sarah, a successful professional in the hotel business, contrary to her parents' desire for her to become a lawyer, took up her own business after graduating from university. She quickly rose through the ranks at a local hotel and conference center, part of a large chain. Despite reaching the top job 2 years ago, she declined a promotion that would have required her to move to Kansas. Sarah, was there anything special today? I asked. You look a little more dressed up than usual, and you had to stay late. Did the top management of the corporation come to the city for the holiday? No, but you're very attentive, Greg, Sarah admitted. The day after tomorrow will be the 4th, and we always sponsor the Grand Marshal's expedition. This year, the newspaper wanted to print some photos before the parade. Suddenly, I was overcome by a wave of inner trembling. I noticed that Sarah's silence was a wake-up call for me. Sarah, our beloved golden boy and war hero, is supposed to come to the city for filming. You missed the fact that he will also be the Grand Marshal at the parade. Will he be filming with you? I asked. Sarah clenched her hands convulsively and looked around the room for other distractions. Her usual composure faltered, which piqued my interest. Sarah explained that the hotel had generously donated a room for a local military hero. She claimed it was all about good public relations since the hero's parents had moved from Williamsport, and he had nowhere to stay. Sarah reasoned that it made sense to give a room to a man who was wounded in service to his country and was the Grand Marshal at the upcoming 4th of July parade. It's just good business, she insisted, raising her voice slightly. I couldn't help but ask her why she was so worried if there was nothing to worry about. Sarah reluctantly admitted, No, well, maybe a little. It's just that we've always tried to avoid the subject of Jason. I know how you feel about the fact that we dated in high school and how annoying it is when people keep mentioning his name. This is strictly a business matter, Greg. You are my husband and the only man I love and have ever loved. You have to believe it. I'm very pleased to hear you say that, Sarah, and I want to believe you, I said. But the question arose, why did you find it necessary to hide information about Jason's return from me? I asked. I knew it was a sore subject, and I didn't want you to worry or get upset. He just doesn't mean anything to me, Sarah objected. Then I shouldn't have any reason to be upset, and you shouldn't have any reason to hide information from me, right? I responded. No, Greg, not really. I am glad that we are openly discussing this. Jason's ghost has been hovering over us since we tied the knot, or even before, I added. So, are there any other events planned? I asked. Colonel Benson will lead the parade and organize an informal reception at the hotel the next day, Sarah said. The hotel will provide snacks and drinks, and people will have a chance to make a good impression on him. Do you have a problem with that? Sarah inquired. I don't think it matters, Sarah. The piggy bank has already been abandoned. Plans have been determined. I may not be involved in this, but I can handle it if you're honest with me. He doesn't mean anything to you, does he? You're not going to look at him like a deer in headlights, are you? I questioned. Sarah reacted to my statement with annoyance, but her expression quickly changed to a smile when she caught my eye. She hugged me and expressed her love, saying, Greg, I love you so much. You are the only man who has ever attracted the attention of this heart or any other part of me. We both laughed at her playful remark. I hope this applies to everything, not just your eyes, I replied with a smile. You know that's all I have, honey, Sarah whispered softly. It's all one of a kind, and it's all for you. After walking through the living room, we told the girls that we were too tired to eat and were going to bed. They'll have to make do with the roast beef left over from last night, Sarah remarked. Too tired. June giggled. Looks like we better cover our ears. The last time you were so exhausted, you kept us up half the night. Sarah blushed and said, Maybe we should wait until the girls are asleep, and closed our bedroom door. I don't want them to get suspicious. They already think we have some kind of intimate business, I told Sarah, and we shared a moment of closeness. The next night, when Sarah was cooking dinner, I casually asked how her day had been, knowing that I was really asking about Jason and what was going on between them. It went well, Greg, she replied. Jason has become even more determined and energetic than he was at school. I think his service as an officer and participation in the war developed his natural leadership qualities, Sarah replied. Sarah, I appreciate your point of view on Jason's growth as a leader, but let's be honest. When I asked you for honesty, I didn't expect you to praise him. I want to know the truth about his flaws and why you chose me over him. That kind of honesty is exactly what I want to hear, I expressed. Greg, even if this guy is an Army Ranger and a war hero, all tough and brave, he's still no match for you, Sarah exclaimed. That's the spirit. Can you tell me the details? I asked. Well, the President of the United States personally called Jason today to thank him for his outstanding service. But don't forget that just 2 years ago, you were the vice president of the Lost Club. Jason isn't even a member of the club, Sarah explained. I nodded in agreement. The guy probably thinks he's too good for the club, I said. He will never become the treasurer of a football club. That's for sure, Sarah added, nodding in agreement. That's exactly what I was thinking. Most likely, tomorrow after the parade, he'll also fail his interview on Fox News, and his book is sure to be boring. Most likely, he won't become a general until he's 50 years old, I remarked. I almost screamed, this is a real test of character. There should be rewards for this. Anyone can get into trouble. I have to admit, Greg, it helps a lot when we communicate honestly and in an adult way. Sarah grinned. No one compares to my man, she added. I hugged Sarah tightly. When she looked up at me, I kissed her passionately. Why don't the two of us find a more private place? Someone joked. April came into the room and said, This is the kitchen where I cook. Sarah blushed and tried to move away, but I held her back. Dad, you really love Mom, don't you? April teased. Do you think I'll ever find someone who loves me the same way? She asked. Not until you graduate from college, I replied, half-jokingly. "You won't have any trouble finding guys," Sarah assured April. Admiring April's face, I turned to leave, feeling my own cheeks heat up. Raising daughters can be difficult, I thought. The parade became a hit, and cable news crews covered Colonel Benson, a rising star who embodied everything the media wanted to see on Independence Day. After watching his evening interview, I had to admit that he was charismatic and well-spoken. There was pride in him when he talked about being an American. The day after the parade was full of chaos. Sarah left early to make sure everything was in order for the open house they were hosting for Benson. The presence of a cable news crew staying at her hotel only added to her stress. Deciding to express my gratitude for everything Sarah does for me and the girls, I went into Jeff's jewelry store. After considering several options, I settled on a pair of diamond earrings as a token of appreciation. Jeff tried to convince me to buy a necklace, but I had already exhausted my budget and bought her earrings. While walking around the main conference room, I watched the Colonel. Despite the fact that everyone in the city seemed to look up to him, he remained humble and polite, earning my respect. Sarah effectively controlled the event, making sure everything went smoothly. The hotel had a good reputation in the city, thanks to a well-organized business. The event was supposed to end by 6 o'clock, but at 7:30, a handful of acolytes and fans lingered, unwilling to leave until the free food and drinks were gone. Anticipating the imminent end of the meeting, I slipped into Sarah's office unnoticed. My plan was to surprise her with the earrings I brought, and then pass on an invitation to a neighborhood party, where she could show off the new jewelry in front of her friends. After waiting for Sarah for 15 minutes, I decided to use her toilet. As I was finishing washing my hands, the sound of the office door closing caught my attention. My smile quickly disappeared when I realized that a man's voice was now heard in the room. The door to the room was slightly ajar, which allowed me to easily eavesdrop on the conversation. "I remember, Sarah. I can't help but tell you again, you look amazing. Just being around you is driving me crazy. You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever been with," Jason's voice said. My stomach rumbled, and sweat broke out on my forehead. I felt dizzy and had to lean on the wall to keep from falling. "This is very flattering, but please refrain from making such statements about me. I'm happily married, and I don't want any misunderstandings," Sarah replied firmly. "It was a long time ago. Let us leave it in the past," she added. "Sarah, I feel like there's still something between us. I noticed this during our work together in the last few days. And please, call me Jay," Jason continued. "I agreed to come here for the holidays just to see you again, and I have to say, it was worth it," Jason said. "Surely you wanted to show off in front of the residents of your hometown during the parade," he added. "You are a local guy who has achieved great success," Sarah expressed, her voice trembling. Jason begged Sarah to join him, as he had to leave early the next morning. He offered to express his gratitude for his contribution to the development of the country, and to her personally. The thought made me feel sick, but I held back the urge to react. Knowing that Sarah would find out that I was eavesdropping, I concentrated on breathing to keep my composure. I managed to pull myself together and calm down. "I'm married, Jason," Sarah reasoned. "My husband would suspect something right away. He would be upset, to put it mildly." "I saw him, Sarah," Benson replied. "He's not one of those who creates problems. I've had a lot of people like him under my command. They never challenged me. He won't dare tell you anything," Benson reasoned. That remark made my blood boil, but I remained silent. "Jason, why don't you stay a few more days if you want to see me more often?" Sarah asked, her tone gentle. "I can free your room from unnecessary hassle and make it more accessible." "I can't, Sarah," Jason replied. "I have to go to Washington tomorrow. It's all part of climbing the corporate ladder. I've devoted more than 20 years and a lot of effort to this cause, and I'm getting closer to the goal." Sarah asked Jason if it was true that Rangers have a rule about never abandoning a comrade, to which Jason proudly confirmed. He explained that they take an oath to always watch each other's backs, emphasizing the importance of trust. Sarah offered to go to her room, teasing Jason with the opportunity to spend the night with a real hero. Jason found her offer tempting. "Jason, I don't quite understand some things. Could you explain them to me first?" Sarah asked. "Of course, Sarah. I will be happy to explain everything so that we can move on to a sweet night," Jason replied. "Jason, why do you think you're better than my husband? Do heroes have to have medals and badges to be considered heroes?" Sarah questioned. "I'm not sure I understand the question," Benson replied slowly. "Your husband has never put his life at risk. He never served in the war. He stayed at home, supported classes for girls, and attended parent-teacher conferences. He didn't do anything courageous," Benson added. "Greg took over our daughter's soccer team when the coach was injured in a car accident, and no one else volunteered. At first, he didn't even know the rules. He spent time studying books and searching the internet to learn. Despite the difficulties and mistakes, he remained a mainstay for the team, especially for the girls," Sarah countered. "He didn't just take care of my father after the stroke, showing his love and dedication. Sarah proudly called me her hero, and Benson recognized my good qualities, despite his doubts about men who do not perform such duties." "Jason, this reaction is unacceptable," Sarah declared. "Greg worked the night shift all year to be able to attend events for the girls. The following year, he got 2 jobs to help us save up for the down payment on the house. When he found our daughter June smoking in the garage with her friends, he put her on her knees in front of them and gave her a firm talking to. June burst into tears, expressed her anger at him, and ran to her room. He stayed up all night worrying about her. The next day, she apologized, vowed never to smoke again, and then hugged him," Sarah recalled. "This is what it means to be a real family man, Jason," she remarked. "But how could you expect me to break my oath? You preach honesty and don't hesitate to demand that I give up my own," Sarah said, her tone becoming more and more dispassionate. "You claim that you've devoted so much time to your career and don't want to risk it, but what about my career and investments? You didn't hesitate to jeopardize my job and my marriage by bragging about your achievements. Do you really value me and my life so low? Haven't I spent 2 decades building my life, my marriage, my career?" She demanded answers. "After listening to your point of view, Sarah, I understand that I could get carried away," Benson admitted hesitantly. "I just think you're incredibly beautiful, and we've had some unforgettable moments. But those memories belong to you, not me," Sarah replied with a curt nod. Benson excused himself and abruptly left, closing the door behind him. I hesitated in the bathroom, afraid that Sarah would find out that I had overheard their conversation. Fortunately, I heard the office door open and close again, which meant she was gone. After making sure everything was clear, I headed to my car and crossed the parking lot, dialing Jeff's number. Later, while helping the girls in the kitchen, I anxiously waited for Sarah's return. When she finally came in, I couldn't help but say, "Sarah, I'm so glad you're home." She explained that she was busy with paperwork, but I pulled her to me and kissed her, feeling the surge of emotion. When I hugged her, my heart was filled with joy. In the end, I pulled away, unable to contain my feelings for her. "Wow, Mom, Dad looks very pleased when he sees you, doesn't he?" June giggled. "I hope my husband will greet me the same way after 2 decades of marriage." Sarah was looking at me, trying to figure out why I was so glad to see her and why I didn't need to explain my lateness. "June, I would like you to find a husband like our dad." Sarah nodded in agreement. "He is always full of surprises and loves his family very much." I took a small, beautifully wrapped package out of the drawer and handed it to Sarah. She carefully took it from me and examined it, putting the paper aside. Then she picked up the box with a sense of anticipation. She slowly lifted the lid, and at the sight of what was inside, tears welled up in 3 pairs of eyes. The room was filled with a feeling of warmth and tenderness, and the air enveloped the space. I carefully inserted the earrings into her ears, and my daughters noticed my expression. "Dad, are you crying?" June asked. I replied that these were tears of joy and said, "There is no one in the world better than your mother." Story 2. I've been married for 15 years, with 3 kids, Michael, Jason, and Marcy, a nice house, 2 newish cars, and a wife who can afford to work for a nonprofit, because we really don't need the money. I have a job that interests me, and the workload has dropped in the last 4 years. Reasonable hours, occasional travel for work and pleasure. I thought I had it made. Wife, family, 2-car garage in a good school district. What more could you want? Until I came home from work one day, and my wife, Andrea, was sitting in the kitchen, looking nervous. "Hey, what's up with you? What's wrong? Are the kids all right?" Her face contorted. "They're fine, Jeffrey, but I've got some really bad news to deliver. I'm leaving you for Mary James. It's nothing you did. There's nothing you can do to change my mind. I've emptied my closet and bureau. Everything else is yours." I felt my gut roll. Who the hell is James? What's he got that I haven't? You love him. I do love him. We've been seeing each other for about a year. He's the governor's cousin from the side of the family that inherited most of the family fortune. The children and I will move in with him in Greenville, Delaware. That floored me. You've been seeing him for a year, and I never had a clue. I was stunned. The world as I know it is gone. It's true then, the husband is the last to know. Well, I guess I made it easy for you, me trusting you implicitly. Are the children mine? Of course they are. How could you think that of me? Oh yes, they're yours. She was nice looking, but not a stunner, and nothing out of the ordinary in the bedroom. Unless she must have worked a lot harder to please him than she ever did with me. But what's the point? The pain was turning to bitter anger, but I was able to keep control of myself. I guess I've been seeing $1 million escort. I glared at her, jumped to my feet, and gestured towards the door. Well, get out of my house, and don't let the door hit you on the way out, you cheating witch. Enjoy the good life until he dumped you for someone younger. I have nothing more to say to you. She tossed an envelope on the table and moved quickly out the door, and I sat and cried. I went upstairs to lie down and saw that the children's rooms had been emptied out, including the pictures they had hung on the walls. It felt like I was living in a tomb. In the weeks to follow, she and James refused to let me talk with my kids. It was Marcy who snuck out and knocked on my door. We worked out a clandestine meeting arrangement. I got 6 burner phones and gave the kids one of the numbers. Every couple of weeks, I gave them a new number, so if anyone checked their phones, my numbers were only called occasionally. We were careful about emails, which could only be sent from library computers or a friend's computer. I used the name Lenny Elmore, after Elmore Leonard, the wonderful author, as my email name again, to hide from my ex. So I kept up with their lives, not as often as I would like. Well, Marcy called every other day, usually on a friend's phone, and the boys about once or twice a week. In the months that followed, it didn't get better. Words cannot describe the fury, hurt, depression that washed over me. I was drowning. Andrea had traded up in marriage so far up that she didn't bother to ask for any of our assets, alimony, or child support. There was no point. To her credit, she asked for nothing of any commercial value, but what she did take was priceless. My 3 children. We sometimes read stories where a woman is offered $1 million to have a close encounter with some guy. Usually it's women we wonder about, the assumption being that most guys would do it for free. The goofy part of that question is, who would pay $1 million for a close encounter, especially with an average person? I guess that Buchanan has tens of millions of dollars, so I can see her bailing for that. Who knows, maybe it was love. I can't say for sure. I wouldn't have run off with a Mrs. Buchanan, but I suppose you don't know until someone offers, and the kids too, hiding contact with me. I guess it's the money too, The promise of a free Ivy League education along with the more immediate pleasures of the lifestyle big money can bring. Cars, clothes, skiing in Aspen, summer in France, doesn't compare with surf fishing at the Jersey Shore with Pop. But neither does it excuse my children for not insisting on having a foot in each camp. I thought I'd brought them up better than that. But then they are kids. The biggest thing was still, what the hell did Buchanan see in her? She really didn't stand out in any crowd I could imagine. She was middling in about everything. She was really good with people, but so are a lot of people. As to our friends, most stayed cordial, but now being single, occasionally I was asked to a party, and I did have a couple of buddies to fish with, but I was really lonely without my best friend, and I felt like damaged goods, which I was. I thought of suing them, but my lawyer told me to forget it, that I really didn't have a chance. And for what? I make good money, $130,000 a year, which is a nice living. But against Buchanan. So I caved and tried to get on with my life. Like I said, in that wrenched first year, I really had a hard time. My home was now just a house. Functionally, I was on the very edge of my children's lives. I wasn't fit to date women either. Really, it was my daughter that got me through that horrible year. I kept it together by immersing myself in work. I mean, what else could I do? I felt sorry for myself, buried in self-pity, rolled in misery like a dog, and for almost a year, after 6 months of that, I sold the Dan house and got an apartment in town, cut way back on overtime, and began to flesh out ideas I had come up with over the years, but were ignored by the elderly guys in management. I realized I was a better businessman than the fools running the company ever see clearly the way for the business to grow and prosper, but the management couldn't let go of the old business model they developed years ago, which successfully built the business, but was wrong for today's world and was taking it down. It was like I was sailing on the Titanic, with me the only one who could see the iceberg. What could you do besides dress warmly and stand near the lifeboats, reading the launch instructions? My job search was producing nothing until out of the blue, I got a job interview from a company that bought one of our smaller competitors. They wanted me to implement my employer's old business model so they could grow their company. In a series of interviews, I pointed out the problems with that and outlined my own ideas. They were actually willing to pay a premium to lure me away from Titanic Incorporated, and more besides because their business was in Chestertown, Maryland. I was able to negotiate a big vacation package by agreeing to take most of 1 day a week in a contract tied to business growth and profits. Apparently, they had had trouble getting people to relocate to a backwater. Charming or not, Chestertown is as chaotic in the summer as it is dead in the winter. I jumped at the chance to make a clean break of it, changed my email address, got a new phone number. Of course, my children knew, but not their mother. Of course, in this age of the internet, if you live your life, you cannot really disappear, but I thought of it as a way to reinvent myself, as neither my former employer nor my former wife valued me, and it helped to put them in the fuzzy light of the past. Now, I didn't get big-time rich like Buchanan, but I did real well by my standards, and as the business took off, I was able to hire talented young people to implement the business plan. After a few years, I found myself with a nice equity position and began working from home a lot and let others do the day-to-day stuff. I rented a place for a while until I found a big 3-bedroom craftsman-style bungalow on a lot with a view, but within walking distance of Chesterton. The big demand here is for old historic homes, but houses from the 1920s, 1930s are modern houses and pretty reasonably priced. As a bonus, it had $20,000 of woodworking tools in a heated garage that the old guy bought new when he retired, but never got around to learning how to use. I joined the local historical society, volunteered for this and that, put myself out there, as they say. But unfortunately, the selection of suitable mates was thin. I was 45 years old, relatively few single women in the 35 to 40 age group, and of the few of a suitable age. Well, I'll get shot for saying this, but the education level of the year-round residents was mixed, and the summer people were generally too high-end for my taste. One of the members of the Historical Society asked me if I could fix an electrical problem on his boat. I liked the old guy, so he and I spent Saturday on the boat, and I fixed a plethora of assorted problems. We took it out for a short cruise, and I found I liked sailing, and he liked company, so he taught me sailing. We worked out a trade. I keep all the mechanical and electrical stuff running. He'd pay someone to do the endless cosmetic restoration and cleaning, and I could take it out more or less at will. I just had to call in advance if it was a day sail. Often as not, we would go out together. I should tell you that I could have bought the damn boat, but I'm cheap, and who wants the expense of owning and maintaining a boat? I was at the marina changing the oil in the auxiliary engine and heard hoots and shrieks as a boat was wallowing up to the dock. I grabbed a boat hook and trotted over. Seeing the run of the tide, I called for the stern rope. They threw it short, but I could just hook it and pull the stern to the dock, whereupon the tide pushed the bow so I could catch that rope, which was dragging in the water, and tie them fast. The idiot at the wheel was drunkenly insisting I join their party for dinner at one of the expense account restaurants nearby. I had no interest in spending the evening with a bunch of honking drunks, and politely demurred when a really good-looking woman came up beside Captain Rum. Don't be put off by Wallace. I would like you to come to dinner with us. After all, you rescued us so much. You can infer from her ascension. She was sober, no rings on her left hand, nice-looking, educated, faint British accent, with a body built for comfort. Now, would you be sitting alongside me at dinner? Hoots of teasing laughter from the boat. He hooked the boat, and you hooked him. Way to go, Heather. We were smitten with each other. Heather was 7 years younger than me, worked in a law office in Washington, D.C., writing laws and regulations for lobbyists. She was a gorgeous thing, not Hollywood gorgeous, but somebody I certainly would pick out of a crowd. As we talked, I found she shared my politics, love of old things, the water, and reading. She couldn't have children, which bothered her years ago when she got the news, but over the years, she became reconciled with it. Me, after the experience I had with mine, that didn't bother me at all. Heather, I don't want this night to end. No strings here. Would you stay at my house? I have a guest bedroom with a locking door. Not that you need to. Got your driver's license with you. Give it to me. I handed it over. She took a picture of it with her phone, emailed it. There, if I don't come back in one piece, my mother will come after you. Can you drive me to Waldorf Sunday night? Sure. Where's Waldorf? No cabs around the restaurant, but I waved to a couple of older women I knew fairly well who were just leaving, and I asked them if they could drop us off at the marina where my car was. One of them had set me up with 2 blind dates and was delighted to see I was sweet on Heather. After the introductions to Granulia, who prefers to be called Lily, they teased Heather. Lily started in, Jeffrey is a real asset to Chesterton. I tried to fix him up with a local girl or two, but my mistake was not being able to find anybody who looks as lovely as you. We want to keep him here, so when you marry him, you have to agree to live here. Grace chimed in, he can cook, fix anything, and has a good income, plus he's nice to sweet old ladies. Heather gave it right back. Well, if he's been rejected by all the young women around here, maybe I should be careful. They must know something I don't. Lily, or more likely, you recognize what you've got there, but a very disheveled dresser. He does need taking care of. Ladies, please. I just met Heather this afternoon. You'll scare her away. We didn't have sex that weekend, but the next weekend we took the boat out and were physically intimate, as both of us were ending a long dry spell. Physically, she was the opposite of my ex-wife. The ex was short, skinny, and blonde. Heather was almost as tall as me, nicely rounded body, and jet black-haired. She was English, her father from Avery, England, and her mother from Madras, India. Best of all, we laughed at each other's jokes. Unfortunately, she was also the polar opposite of my ex-wife in not-so-good ways. Andrea was willing to try anything you ever read about or saw in a spicy film, and willing to do it a lot. Heather liked intimacy, but she was pretty uptight. I was puzzled because she talked a good game but was really limited in the bedroom, and it wasn't getting any better. I had no trouble getting her to climax, but she thought intimate acts, outdoor intimacy, and just about everything else were perverted or disrespectful to her personally. I was about to reluctantly toss her back into the dating pool when I got an inspiration. One cold, wet day in the fall, we were walking into Chesterton one Saturday, and I realized that she was the only woman in town still wearing sandals. I wondered if she had a foot fetish. I got 2 drinks in her that evening at the restaurant and a glass of wine at the house, so she was pretty laid back. Heather, some people feel that intimacy can be gross or humiliating, and that loving people should be dignified when in bed together. I think my job is to do for you whatever you enjoy, and that your job is to do for me whatever I enjoy. Jeffrey, don't you like making love with me? What are you talking about? What we do, you and I, is love-making. You're good at that, but there's also lusty drilling and sex play. And we haven't done anything like that tonight. I'd like to play at sex. Not getting into the details, but we had a grand finish. It was the first lesson I taught her in the pleasurably long and delightful journey of how to give and get great intimacy. This year, the weather was remarkable, mild well until October, and our romance was perhaps the happiest time for me in decades. Once a week, weather permitting, we'd sail on Chesapeake Bay. Often it was warm enough to shed our clothes for a while, with no other boat in sight, and have a beer swim, and generally have fun once or twice and snuggle under a blanket as the boat rocked us to sleep, and then to make love in the cool dawn. That fall, we fell in love. Chesterton is 150 years away from D.C. in lifestyle, but only an hour and a half by car. That winter, she sold her Waldorf condo and rented a pied-à-terre in D.C., moving in with me in Chesterton. She has a somewhat flexible schedule, and most weeks spend a couple of nights in D.C., and the rest with me. I proofread her stuff, not so much for spelling and grammar, but for clarity and completeness. I would be bullshitting to say that I truly understood everything she wrote, but in the moment, I could follow it. And if I couldn't, there was a problem with it. She was a bit more social than me, but I liked people too, and we both enjoyed going out with her friends in town, my near home, and life was good. She had to go into D.C. one Sunday morning to spend the next couple of days preparing for a case, and as it happened, the town council meeting I had attended was over sooner than expected that Monday, so to surprise her, I drove to the apartment, getting there about 9:30. No sign of her, so I called, and her phone went to voicemail. I admit, having been blindsided by my cheating witch of an ex-wife, it worried me a bit. She returned my call an hour later, saying she was taking a break, but would be working half of the night. We chatted, me wondering how to ask her where she was when she volunteered it. This is turning out to be a hell of a week. We found out Sunday that our office didn't do well on the federal truck standards, so this morning we all decamped to the Westin in Fairfax to get it done by 2:00 p.m. tomorrow. I'll be lucky to sleep at all tonight. The only good news is I'll be able to be back in Chesterton a day early. Oh, good. Actually, the council meeting ended early, so I thought I'd surprise you. I'm at the apartment. Oh, you poor thing. Spend the night. I should be back about noon or 1. We can have lunch. I'd normally take you up on that, but I need to get back in the morning, and you'll be exhausted. Honey, I'm so sorry I missed you. At least I'll catch your scent when I slide between the sheets. I'll be missing you. I'll take a long nap at the apartment tomorrow and be home in time for a late supper. I love you. A week later, she said, I realized I have to shut my phone off a lot when I'm in meetings or just so I can concentrate, but then I don't know who was calling. So I got a smartphone for just you and me. We can set it up so you can track me. That way, you'll know where I am. I don't need to know that. I trust you, she laughed. I trust you as well, but I have no secrets from you, and you never know. That phone feature may come in handy sometime for some other reason. So, she gave me the gift of knowledge, which wasn't so good for Adam and Eve, but for me, I checked where she was a few times, and never bothered again. We had had the biblical 7 years of good luck, and I wondered if it was coming to an end when I opened my door one Saturday morning to be greeted by my ex-wife. I wrinkled my nose and said, "You're dead to me," as I shut the door. Of course, Heather heard what happened. "Who is that?" "My ex-wife." I told her to get lost, but now she's knocking again. "Oh, how nice. Invite her in." I told her she was dead and shut the door on her. Heather glared at me. "It's my house too, and you'll be nice to her if only because she's a guest in our house. Things are obviously going very poorly for her, or she wouldn't be here." Heather smiled as she opened the door. "My husband tells me you're Andrea. How nice to finally meet you. I'm Heather, by the way." I looked at her more carefully and shivered a little. Andrea was always thin, but now she looked gaunt, with sunken eyes and cheeks. My first thought was, what the hell did I ever see in her? And the second had me wondering if she was seriously ill. Andrea looked at me warily and said, "I'm sorry to intrude. I won't be long." Heather slid right in with, "Don't worry about that. We're staying at home this afternoon. We were thinking of going out, but Jeffrey has some yard work to get done. I do so want to talk with you. Did you have a pleasant drive down?" I took the hint and went outside. "Call me when the coffee's ready," and left them to themselves. It must have been 20 minutes later Heather called. "Coffee's ready." I had put the last quart of oil in the mower and went in the house to clean my hands and pour a coffee. I sat with them as they finished their chatter. Peace came over me. I realized thankfully that I had no feelings for Andrea at all. No love, no hate, zero emotions of any consequence. And looking at the two of them, I can honestly say I was well rid of her. The coffee mugs were finally empty. "So, after all these years, Andrea, I don't suppose this is a social call." "No, it isn't. You have 2 daughters. The youngest is 7 years old and needs a kidney transplant." Jesus, what a bombshell. No, of course, I knew she and Buchanan had a daughter, but mine can't be. "You don't say. That's too bad, but as you know, I've never met this child, so why don't you go to Switzerland or wherever money can buy everything and fix her? That's got nothing to do with me." So for the second time, why are you here? My husband's shooting blanks and handing me an envelope. I knew you would be doubtful, so I got the DNA reports. I didn't have a sample of your DNA, but all of your children have the same father. She's your flesh and blood. We're having trouble finding a kidney match, and she's in total kidney failure. Jeffrey, she won't live all that long, and the doctors think you're likely a match. I'm not, or I wouldn't be here. I'm here to ask you to be checked for a match, and if so, to save her life by donating a kidney. I'll pay you anything you ask. Heather saw me starting to go orbital and put her hand on my arm, squeezed hard, and jumped in. "We need to discuss this. Why don't you email us the detailed information, and we'll discuss it and get back to you." Every day she's suffering, Andrea. Let me talk to Jeffrey. I'll call you the day after tomorrow. I promise. Heather stood up and rummaged in the desk for one of my business cards as Andrea was leaving. I couldn't help saying sarcastically, "It was nice to hear how the number of my ex-child is multiplying. Do let me know if any more pop out. Drive carefully on your way back to where you came from." I shut the door while Heather walked Andrea to the car, talking earnestly. I reheated a cup of coffee, thinking the nerve of the witch to rub her money in my face, and went out to my shop. Heather called me a couple of hours later for supper. Well, there's what I'd call a troubled woman. Her child is dying, facing a slow death, and the only best hope is a big-time favor from a guy who hates her. And that weren't enough. Her marriage is shaky. That about sum it up. I don't hate her, I just despise her. And I don't despise her for dumping me, but rather for depriving me of my children, and depriving my children of me. She thinks she has it rough, facing the loss of a kid. Okay, my kids aren't dead, but they might as well be because they aren't really a part of my life. You think the kids are really mine? I doubt she'd lie about that. I imagine you'll find out pretty quickly if they check you for a kidney match. I've got to read up on that. I really don't know anything about kidney disease, transplants, or anything like that. Did you make her any promises? Just what you heard me say about calling her Tuesday. The child is stable but not good, and Jeffrey, I'll support you whatever comes. I got looking up on Wikipedia, the National Kidney Foundation website, and found that the kid eventually dies without a new kidney. There is a huge shortage of kidneys. The best outcome is if the donor is a close match to the recipient. The kid would probably get a transplant at some point, but it would be a miserable time for her until she got one, and she might still die of kidney failure. Sunday night, I poured Heather a glass of the good wine we save for company, not the usual stuff we have on the table. You realize, I would love to kick her to the curb and throw her under a bus. She hasn't changed a bit. Had she not absolutely needed me, she never would have told me about my daughter. But I have to do this. You know that, don't you? This what? Throw her under the bus or donate a kidney. We both laughed. It broke the tension. Love, I wish the kid was okay. I wish your children were part of our lives. And I wish you got to keep both kidneys. But if I had a child, I know I'd do anything I needed to save her. And I know you feel the same way. So I understand why you need to give her your kidney. I saw that strength, that courage, and loyalty in you before I married you. I was thinking, so she gave us a get-out-of-jail-free card, didn't she? What do we want to come out of all this? Right now, all the pain and blood is all on me. Well, my daughter too. How can I get the ex and her husband to put some blood in the game? I don't know why you would care. Forget them. Focus on what you want. Do you know what you really want? No, I never really gave it a thought. Do you? She patted my arm and smiled. You need to answer that question, not me. I was thinking, when my other kids were growing up, I was working so hard to bring home the money, working on the house and cars, that I didn't get to enjoy my children much. And then they were gone. So, here's a daughter I don't know at all. I'd like to be part of her life, have my picture taken standing next to her on prom night. They still have proms, don't they? Heather nodded. I'd like to raise her as I wish I could have raised my older children. That's what I want. Jesus, Jeffrey, you want custody. She'll never give you that, and it would be traumatic for the child too. I'd be happy to have Karen on a weekend or two. That might work. I think she might give us custody. Remember the judgment of Solomon. 2 women claimed a child. Solomon decided to cut the kid in half, 1/2 for each claimant. 1 woman agreed. The other renounced her claim rather than let the child die. Solomon declared her the mother. Andrea will do the same, but I want her to have to work for it. Jeffrey, you don't believe that. You can't make custody a condition of donating a kidney. A kidney for the kid for a kidney. What are you thinking? Lots of thoughts running around in my mind right now. You're right. I can't require custody as a quid pro quo. The kid gets my kidney, but I was thinking Andrea doesn't have to know that. I had worked hard to push the rage out of my heart years ago, and did a good job of it too. But seeing Andrea and the secret child, it came flooding back. I wanted revenge on Andrea too, but I didn't tell Heather that. That night, we worked out the framework of a deal, and one of the lawyers Heather worked with offered to work it up into something nice, legal, and enforceable. Just before we went up to Greenville, I added a page at the end. Took me almost 20 minutes to find the same font the lawyers used. I wanted everything to match. Monday, she called Miriam and set up a family meeting between us. Miriam, her husband James, and my 3 older children. We stipulated that Karen not be present, which was only common sense. I went up the day before for a tissue match, which proved she was my daughter, and that I was an excellent match for a kidney donation. While I was doing all that, Heather spent the better part of the day visiting with Andrea and the children, and they got along quite well. The next day, Heather and I sat down with the Buchanans. James was clearly annoyed at the whole thing. Andrea was sick with worry, and my other kids weren't much better. They did look good, wearing quality clothing, expensive haircuts, perfect teeth. Well, I read up on all this, and the Kidney Foundation is a really good charity. I'd like to see them come out ahead on this. So it turns out that you were correct, Andrea. Karen is my daughter, and the good news is that I'm a good match to donate a kidney for her. But what you are asking me to do is to undergo major surgery, pop out one of my kidneys, and give it to a stranger. But she's your child, said my ex-wife. No, she's the child of James and Andrea Buchanan. I waved towards them. You all left my life abruptly, and for good, and none of you ever told me about Karen until you absolutely had to. I have every reason to expect you'll cloister Karen away from me as well, just as soon as you get your pound of flesh out of me. Plus, this is all on me. Not one of you will have shed a drop of blood, not a minute of pain. I mean, you folks don't have any skin in the game, do you? Sorry, but the continuation of my genes isn't that big a deal in my life. Andrea's face was contorted in anguish. There has to be a way. We'll do anything to save her, anything you want. I paused a bit for dramatic effect. What will it take, you ask? Well, two things. For one, I want some time with my daughter minus 72 days a year, 20% of her time. She'll live with Heather and me. Andrea looked confused. What's that? 2 weekends a month. Well, that'd be 48 days, so add a week or two in the summer. That's about 15% of the time. So, okay, I would get her 15% of the time, and you 85% of the time. Okay, so you agree that would be fair? She looked at her husband, who shrugged and said, more than fair. I think so too. We agree on that. Now consider what I will be going through. Perfectly healthy, getting cut open, and an organ removed to help someone else live. How many of you in my place would be willing to do what you are asking me to do? Raise your hand. The 3 women's hands shot up. My 2 sons hesitated but followed. Finally, James's hand went up. So you'd all be willing to do what you want me to do? They looked at each other, nodding. Then we have the makings of a deal that will help the Kidney Foundation too. On one day, Andrea and I will donate kidneys, one to Karen and one to the transplant program. And when I come out of surgery, James goes in to donate a kidney to the foundation as well. When that happens, Karen gets my kidney, and I get custody of Karen. What did we say? 15% of the time. That seems fair to us all. How's that sound? You two will be written up in the paper as heroes. James saw a distinction. You'll take credit for it all. What's credit to me? You can say it was your idea. You're all the more noble because your donation is going to strangers, not to kin. Everybody nodded. They were good with it. But James didn't look all that happy. I gave him a verbal poke. You okay with this, Jim? He quickly put on his public happy face. Sure. It's a good thing to do. And it helps lots of people, so why not? Andrea and the others smiled and nodded. Andrea gushed. Thank you, Jeffrey. You don't know what this means to me. You're wrong about that, Andrea. I do know what this means to you. In fact, more than you realize. But we all agree that Andrea, James, and I will donate a kidney, nodding all around. Okay, so here's the contract for you all to sign. There is a penalty clause on the next to last page, which is my second condition. Andrea and James have to initial it and date it. James got serious in a hurry. What the hell is this about? A contract? We're all family here. That's not called for, and I, for one, won't sign. My replacement was grating on my nerves, the pompous prick. We're all family here, Jimmy, but only like the interlocking Olympic rings. Different families. My wife and I are a family. You, Andrea, and the children are a family. And the children, Andrea, and I are a biological family. So the family bit is sort of muddled. The nice thing about contracts is everybody knows what they are agreeing to in advance. The penalty clause is if, for any reason, either of you cannot or will not donate a kidney, Heather and I get custody of Karen. She takes my last name. And the custody figures, which we all agreed were fair, reverse. We get her 85% of the time. You get her 15% of the time. Of course, we lean into this, but if one of you reneges, she'll be registered in the spring for school in Chesterton. Pandemonium. I had to raise my voice. People, people, people. If you all go through with the deal, you get what you all agreed was exactly fair. Only if one of you backs out do I get custody of just one. Mind you, just one of my 4 children. Let's not be greedy here. Andrea spoke up. We'll take it. Karen lives. That is the big thing here. It's what we all want. It's win-win. She grabbed a pen and signed. James bowed. So Jeff, what happens if you don't go through with it? Andrea and I donate kidneys. You do nothing, and Karen dies. I smiled. Good thinking, Jimmy. Of course, I come out of surgery before you go in, but there might be a problem of some sort. Here's a letter from the Kidney Foundation that, in return for 2 kidneys donated to the foundation, they will put Karen at the head of the list. But you have my word. I will go through with it. What more assurance can I give but my word? Andrea was melting down. Sign it, James, for our daughter's sake. James was hesitant. I'm not sure. Andrea jumped on him. Shut up. There's no good way to finish that thought. Sign the goddamn thing. A week later, Andrea went under the knife, and as soon as the surgeon took a break and changed his scrubs, they cut into me. After I came out of the anesthetic in the ICU, they moved me to a private hospital room. Heather had been with me in the ICU, but as soon as I was settled in the private room, she and Macy came in talking with each other. I got an update on Andrea, and Heather told me the doctor said I was fine. Macy looked me in the eye and told me she regretted how James and Andrea had tried to demonize me. Dad, it was like some kind of cult thinking, like a sacrifice we needed to make for the future. It's stupid on the face of it now, but we were kids, and James and Mom were. They were on a different planet. She started crying. I'd hold you in my arms and hug you, but I'm not up to it at the moment. Heather was right there. I can hug you, Macy. I forgive you, and your dad does too. Come on, you were a kid then, and you did what you could. But in the future, Jeffrey and I want you to be an integral part of our life. My son, Mike, came in the door at that point. Good, you're awake. I'm going to donate a kidney too. I signed up for it while you were under. James bailed, by the way. He's postponed it indefinitely, but it'll never happen. Gosh, Mike, I don't know. Is that such a good idea? You've got your whole life ahead of you. I don't know. You don't have to. The deal is done. Your kidney doesn't let Jimmy off the hook. That had nothing to do with it. Karen gets to live with you guys, and that's all to the good. I think Karen will be better off. I just gave my word. I said I'd do it. If my mother and father could do it. And it's a good thing to do. You know, I've been watching Karen suffer, and as I understand it, they may be able to split my kidney and help 2 people. You had Jimmy figured out, didn't you, Dad? You knew he wouldn't go through with it. And he absolutely hates being called Jimmy. We get grounded for 2 weeks for calling him that. Heather was looking at me as it dawned on her how I engineered this thing. I figured he wouldn't give anybody a pound of flesh, but I didn't want to admit it. But better yet, he would be the goat for Andrea losing her daughter. I really don't know Jimbo at all. Never laid eyes on him until a week ago. He does seem like a bit of a stuffed shirt. He's not one of us, is he, Dad? You tell me. He may be nothing to me, but I rather think he loves you too. That week began the rest of my life. At first, when we had Karen for the weekends, one of her brothers or her sister would bring her down, and often enough, The two of them would stay the day, returning in the late evening, and my wife, or I, would take her home on Sunday. Pretty soon, we had them, Karen and whoever drove her down, for the whole weekend. When that all went well, we went from Thursday night to Sunday night. Often enough, I had my friend's boat, so we sailed, fished, and swam all summer. We took Karen and her sister on vacation, seeing the sights of Washington, D.C., and then took the boys on the same tour. We extended the trips an extra day because we couldn't get the kids out of the Smithsonian. At the end of summer, Andrea came down with Karen. The two of us chatted. She was more relaxed and happy than I could ever remember. Heather gave us some time together. Jeffrey, you know James and I aren't getting along well, don't you? No, actually, I didn't. Heather and I are going great, though. Maybe you ought to chat with her. You guys must have done something right in the past. The kids turned out well. James hasn't really done much in the parenting department, you know. He was more of an older playmate than a father. Yeah, well, I guess that put a lot on you. And from the little I've seen of him, he's not one for sacrifice and hard work. Well, with enough money, you can sit around and fritter your time away, I guess. Did you intend to drive a wedge between us, Andrea? When you bailed on me, you didn't care about me. Now, I really don't give a thought to you. Like you, I wanted Karen to live a normal life. And I wanted my children back in my life. I am willing to share, but I resented greatly that you wouldn't. More than the divorce, I resented that. Well, that's all water under the bridge. I'm good with it now. So, what's your problem with him? He's cheating on me too. I damn near choked, which morphed into a chuckle. The look on her face made me burst into hearty laughter. You were happy enough when you were cheating on your husband and denying him his children, weren't you? You really expect sympathy from me. Turnabout is fair play. Well, believe me, I really do know how you feel, and I agree no one should have to give up a child. Better line up a good divorce lawyer. You'll still be rich, or is there a prenup? She started to laugh too. Jeffrey, you can get me laughing. Yes, turnabout is justice, but justice doesn't feel good from my end. There is a prenup, but yes, I'll be rich, but not happy. That last bit is on you. Somewhere along the line, you missed an essential fact of life. You have to find out what makes you happy and then find someone who will enable you to do whatever it is that makes you happy. Only you can figure it out and make it happen. So, what if James is not the man? Cut your losses and develop an exit strategy. Do what you did last time. Start looking. And when you find someone to be with you, someone to help you through the divorce, at least dump your second husband and marry your third. You're well preserved. Skinny is still in fashion. You've got money. You play golf, tennis, and are probably still great in bed. What are you lacking? Seriously, give Heather a call. Whatever she did when her husband left her worked for her. She can at least commiserate with you more than I can. I started laughing again. I couldn't help myself. Andrea left in the late afternoon. Later, Heather, Karen, and I walked into town for supper and then back home. That night, in bed, I told Heather about our conversation. So, you told her James was just doing to her what she did to you. That wasn't nice. Heather stifled a laugh. You think she was making a run at you? That's an old-time phrase, isn't it? Make a run at you. Don't be silly. She sees how happy I am, how much you and I love each other. Besides, I told her to talk with you. Whatever you did after your divorce worked out fine for you. She can rot in hell for all I care, I added. I went on to tell Heather how much I love her. Heather and I had as grand a time that night as one could have. Andrea eventually moved to Florida and invited us all there for Thanksgiving. She had the dinner catered, and it was awful, at least by home cooking standards. Thereafter, the children alternated going there for Christmas and New Year's, while we all got together for a grand 4th of July picnic in Chesterton. The children kept in touch with James, and to be fair, he took care of them financially. I only saw James twice after that, once for Macy's wedding, and again at Michael's wedding. When Jason married Edward, we held the service in Chesterton. James didn't reply to the invitation, but to his credit, he sent them a check a couple of weeks later. Oh, and Andrea. She spent a fortune on surgery over the years to keep her looks, but surgery does nothing to make you beautiful inside. In a few short years, she became bitter and envious. The children decided that, rather than all visit her, they'd take turns having her visit their houses for the various holidays. That way, each kid took their turn, and none of them had to see her too often. They tell me she's had a long string of lovers, but none stuck around for long. It hasn't been a happy life for her. Me and mine. I'm good. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.